We good, David? All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming along this evening. We've got a small turnout, but I'm sure it'll be an interesting set of talks. I will first introduce Kate Casey. She's our first speaker tonight. Kate is with James Cook University. I'm sure she'll introduce herself a bit further. So would everyone please welcome up Kate?
A mic test to make sure that we're happy with how this is rolling. Is that all looking good from the crew at the back? Excellent. Thank you so much for confirming that. All right, so hi everyone. I'm Kate, as Tristan had introduced before. And in my professional life, I work at JCU as a technical lead. And I have a variety of different technical interests sort of outside my work. And so I wanted to have a chat to you guys tonight sort of about one of those. So what I'm going to do is, okay, that's all up, perfect. So my talk tonight does have a bit of an interesting title. We are, as we know, doing lightning talks tonight. And my talk is Lightning Talk, Facts, Technology, and a Little Catharsis. And I've got my email address there on the screen if anybody wants to contact me or come and have a chat to me afterwards. So it is a bit of an odd title for a talk, I have to admit, but there's 3 reasons that my talk is called this, and we'll focus on lightning tonight. I've always wanted to do a lightning talk and talk about lightning because it feels like it does what it says on the tin. We here at DevNQ all really love technology and the interesting ways that it's used. And there are certainly very interesting ways that technology relates to lightning and is used in that sphere. So I thought that would be a really interesting thing to talk about. And lastly, I'm absolutely terrified of thunderstorms, and I always have been. So I thought, what better way to work through that than to have a bit of a chat with friends and face my enemy and learn a little bit about it. So let's have a go. So first off, let's start with what is lightning actually so that we can understand this beast before we start. So in the most general terms, lightning is a naturally occurring electrostatic discharge during which 2 electrically charged regions temporarily equalize themselves, causing the instantaneous release of boatloads of energy, which is, thanks to Wikipedia for that one, and also I added a bit of stuff in because I thought it needed some extra info. And there are many, many different types of lightning, but because this is a lightning talk, I can't go through all of these because there are far, far too many. There are very sort of traditional methods with which lightning operates, which we understand quite well. I've highlighted a couple of really interesting ones that I've learnt about. Volcanic, which happens when really heavy plumes of dust explode into the open air out through a volcano and particles rub together and produce static electricity, and it looks pretty spectacular. There are also elves, sprites and blue jets, which happen actually above a thundercloud in varying colours and shapes. And there is also the very classic ball lightning that many of you have probably heard of but haven't actually seen, with lots of instances where there's a floating disc of light that appears on an aircraft, usually in a film, but there are actually some documented instances of this in real life, which is quite interesting. So some facts about lightning. Strikes are actually hotter than the surface of the sun, and this in fact can be many magnitudes hotter, which I thought was really intriguing because you understand it's a huge burst of energy, but that heat is just incredible. There is also rapid heating that obviously happens in quick succession, and that causes the air vibration that we all hear as thunder. Definitely one of my least favourite things. Peak currents in strikes, depending on whether they are positive or negative and the directions, can be hundreds of thousands of amps and at many millions of volts. So absolutely astronomical amounts of power that are released by these events. And lightning can actually strike in the same place twice. Of course, it is statistically unlikely over a really short period of time, but if we're looking at 800 years, 8,000 years, 8 million years, statistically it probably will happen in pretty much the same place. So how can we study lightning using technology? Because we're all technologists and we're interested in what we can do. So there are several open data sets that are provided by different groups, including NASA. So there's actual special sensors on different satellites like the International Space Station, and that provides data for users to download. And also NOAA, who have many, many weather stations to provide this kind of information. There are also some really interesting open source projects like Lightning tools, which I've actually cloned this repo, and it's built largely on some Jupyter notebooks for some of the work that they're doing. So I've got that going, and that gives us information like this. So you can use the data sets that they have actually consumed to build these kind of really interesting images. So accumulated lightning flashes, different climatology items that provide us information in space, and also some really interesting storm tracking diagrams so that we can see where storms are moving and also the severity of different kinds of storms. There are also some really interesting tools like this one here, which is one of my favorites that I'm going to reload so that you can actually see in real time what's happening with storms in North America. So we can see that there's quite a lot of different lightning strikes happening, which are those round blobs. And if I go here, you can see where the detectors are across the country that are actually saying, yes, I have seen that strike, and this is the detector that reported it. So there's all sorts of really interesting items that can help provide us with this sort of information. We also have quite a few different government-run and private services. For example, their Bureau of Meteorology has a tool called SatView, which provides us with different lightning and strike information. NOAA has a satellite radar. Energex has its own product. And then there's private companies like Earth Networks and UBMet who provide different solutions that can actually be sold to individual companies who might require them for things like, airports who require information about weather, that sort of thing. So after all of this, and after what I have learnt, and after what we've talked about, do I actually need to be scared? Well, according to the CDC, 1/3 of lightning-related injuries actually happen indoors, which makes me feel a little unsettled. But storm monitoring is very extensive. And we know this in Townsville because we're always getting warnings from the Bureau of Meteorology saying, hey, there's severe thunderstorms coming in. Make sure, you park your car, under cover and stay away from trees and all those sorts of things. So it's not like storms are going to turn up and we don't know they're coming. And also, if I find enclosed shelter, I stay away from water sources, I stay off my landline, remember those? I think some of us had them at some point. I avoid plugged-in electronic devices, I don't lie on concrete floors, I don't lean against concrete walls, and I take off my tinfoil hat. I should be mostly okay. So some final thoughts for context around lightning and risk. The risk of being struck by lightning, according to the CDC, is about 1 in 500,000. So it's not, it's not really likely. This is something that you're probably relatively safe from if you take reasonable precautions. Your risk of being injured by a toilet if you're under 15 is approximately 113 in 500,000. So the risk of being injured by a toilet is about 113 times more than being struck by lightning. So I'm taking a bit of satisfaction from that. And then also, because we are technologists, I thought I'd look up the risk of being killed in some sort of computer-related accident. Now, there was only one reasonable published source that I could find around this, which is the Computer-Related Accidental Death, an Empirical Exploration paper by Donald Mackenzie, which was printed in 1994. And that tells us that of physical causes of death related to computers, 4% were caused by that. Software error caused 3% of deaths, and approximately 92% were failures in human-computer interaction. So thanks to the CDC for those stats, and also to Donald Mackenzie for that wonderful paper. So my final words to you all around safety and lightning is to stay indoors when it's stormy and don't punch your laptop. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Kate, is there any technology to capture and store the energy from lightning?
That's an actually really interesting question. I was doing a bit of reading into that because I thought surely with this real focus on renewables, there must be some work going on in this space. And there was a company that started up a few years ago that actually was trying to do that. But the problem with lightning is that there is such an enormous burst of electricity or power created in such a small period of time that actually capturing that with any of the conventional sort of devices and technologies that we have at the moment is incredibly difficult. Firstly, because it tends to destroy absolutely everything, because most things are not capable of coping with those voltages and currents. But secondly, the technology to actually store that when it comes in just really isn't there. So there's been a few different projects over time, but nobody's kind of really got into that space at this time because there's just those kind of physical boundaries when it comes to the electricity involved, the sheer magnitude of it. Certainly, I think it's something that would be really worthwhile if people could kind of figure out how to do that. I guess the other thing, of course, is that you can't always guarantee where and when a storm's going to happen. So having giant lightning arresters is one thing, but actually ensuring that a storm turns up where your lightning arresters are is incredibly difficult. So there's a number of factors there that mean it's sort of just not possible. But yeah, hopefully somebody figures that one out, because the statistics around how much power that's actually created is absolutely phenomenal. And a single strike, whilst it could only keep a city going for a few seconds, if that's sort of expanded out, could probably be quite amazing when compared to smaller things like wind power or those sorts of things. So yeah, there's a bit of information around about those projects, but nothing's been successful at the moment. Yes.
Can you put up the slide again, the US one, where it showed the frequency of the, the lightning strikes?
Yes, that's this guy here.
No, the one that had the colors on it. It was before that.
Oh, was it actually a slide?
I think it was.
Yes?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. This one?
No, it might not have been a slide. Anyway, the one where you were showing where the frequency of the lightning is, the absolute reddest spot on there showing the frequency was Florida, and that's where I used to live. Came from Oregon, which was like the least frequent.
Yes.
And I can tell you I was very much like Kate, and I, when I first moved there, had a place that I had to walk a considerable distance to get to my car. So everybody's like, well, put up your umbrella.
Yeah.
Because it's raining, but it's like a spike that's going to draw the lightning.
Yeah.
Being quite quickly,
Yeah.
you did see a lot of people getting struck on fishing boats and golf courses.
Yes.
So I was really surprised to hear that.
Yeah, I think golf courses are probably not a great plan in a thunderstorm somehow. This tool is actually really, really amazing, because you can kind of focus in on the most active storm areas, and it'll kind of like really zoom in, and you can find out where different bits and pieces are happening. So actually I will go to Florida. So yeah, so there's some storm activity happening down there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so no, that's pretty cool technology, I think.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Any other questions?
Is there a historical component to this that goes back like 3 to 5 years or something?
This one does actually have historical data. I'm not sure exactly what blocks it is. I think when I looked at it, it was something like, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year sort of stuff, but I'd have to go back and double check. But they do sort of have storage of that info. They also have a listing of where all of the locations are that are detecting the lightning. So you can actually go in and see where all those places are, where those green lines are coming from.
Is it possible to look up Townsville or Australia?
Yes, so there is Oceania, but I suspect, given the time of year, we may not have a whole lot going on. But yeah, see, we're not seeing any flashes registered here at the moment. But yes, you certainly could zoom in more if you wanted to. Oh no, there's some happening down there. So that's sort of down in Tassie.
Are there any places that it's more common in Australia to have lightning than others?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that question. We'd have to find a meteorologist to tell us about that one. So, yeah, I don't know. Cool. Question at the back.
In your research, was there anything that you saw where people were actually looking whether lightning had struck the exact place in the same time?
Unfortunately not, but I feel a research project happening. So, you know, and I'm pretty sure there's some there's definitely some good open source technology around to support that sort of thing. So you never know.
Like a big data project.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
We could have a data project on protecting our IT gear from lightning.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, that is such an important thing that we all experience every day with making sure that we've got surge protection on our devices and all those sorts of things, and particularly critical, you know, IT devices. We were talking before about, you know, in the health industry, there's obviously, you know, protection that you want to have on devices that are, you know, sort of life support devices or critical data devices. So definitely there's sort of space there to understand what's happening,
Plus
I think.
the networks to hold it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Cool. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Kate, for that very enlightening talk. You were talking about lightning striking the same place twice and not knowing where it's going to strike. I know a clock tower in 1955 where it's going to be struck. Can we make that happen? We can harness energy from that, and I think we can store it in maybe some sort of vehicle, perhaps.
I was actually reading a web page about the calculations to come up with the amount of power required for that and how it differed from the film. So I'll leave that one for you to Google at some point.
1.21 gigawatts.
Yes, yeah, there was a little bit of discussion about the scientific accuracy of that value.
Thanks, Kate. All right, so next up with our second speaker, we have Mick Jacobson. So take it away.
Thank you. Jacobson. So I'm going to talk about infrastructure as code. So I just like talking about cloud and building and designing in the cloud. I'm an AWS community builder. So yeah, just like sharing knowledge and discussing it. So it's just going to be a gentle sort of introduction, what it is, why you might want to use it. So we'll get started. So when you start building in the cloud, it gets out of control pretty quickly. So if you've got a pretty typical design here for a progressive web application, you might want to just use native services, and you can see there's a whole bunch of different services that are making up this design. So how are you going to authenticate users, how are you going to store the data, and maybe like an API, you might want to use like a HTTP or a GraphQL or something like that. And notifications, because who doesn't like notifications, right? So emails, push notifications, text messages, something like that. So if you were to build this in AWS, you might jump into the web console and, you know, straight away there's 200 plus services that you need to, you know, possibly be aware of. For that particular design, you go through each one of those services, go through, build it out and configure it. Each service that you want to build might have, you know, 10, 20, 15 configuration parameters. So if we think about a function in the cloud, you might want to choose the particular development language that you're going to be using, the memory, the timeouts, environment variables, those sorts of things. So you can see as your designs grow, it's going to get out of control pretty quickly. And when you're talking about going from like an MVP into production, recreating that might be a little bit problematic. That's where infrastructure as code comes in. So it's the process for managing the life cycle of the infrastructure using code, and the ability to provision resources and configuration in a consistent, repeatable manner. What we're really talking about is just the ability to be able to create, edit, and delete the stack that we're going to be designing, and the life cycle. So there's a state that we're aware of, and it's going to maintain that, and we're going to have that as configuration as code, which is pretty cool. And then the consistent and repeatable manner. So again, like for an MVP from into production, so being able to do that again and again and again is one of the benefits. So this is CloudFormation. It's from AWS, and you can see this one's written in YAML, so it's pretty descriptive, it's pretty basic. You can see I'm gonna, I want to provision an S3 bucket, so an object store in the cloud, and you can see all the configuration items. It can accept parameters, and you can start to get a picture of sort of templating and reuse. Here's some of the options that you might want to look at when using infrastructure as code. So CloudFormation, which is one of the ones that I've already mentioned. So you can write that in JSON and YAML, and the state is stored in CloudFormation. In AWS, you'd actually just click in the console, click on CloudFormation, and you can see that stack. So if you think of the design that we were talking about, you'd see the stack there. You can see everything associated with that, the events, how it was created, its current state, so it's been provisioned successfully, or there's been an error, which is very useful information, and it's actually free. The really cool one is CDK, which is the Cloud Development Kit. So AWS actually looked back a few years ago at CloudFormation and went, how can we do this differently? And one of the key things from that was abstracting it further. So as your stack gets more complicated, your YAML file gets more complicated and much longer because it's very descriptive. But CDK actually gives you the flexibility to bring different programming languages like TypeScript or JSON or Python, which is really cool. So if you're already writing in that language, that's a huge advantage. So when you talk about cloud native and creating different functions, you might already be creating a function in Python and you're already writing your stack in CDK. So you can see some advantages there. It is open source as well. So AWS developed it, they open sourced it, and the community built it. And there's a lot of people getting behind it. This one integrates directly with CloudFormation. So when you're actually building and provisioning it in the cloud, it's going to actually go via CloudFormation anyway. So you get that state management as well, which is really cool. And it's also free. So Terraform, if you wanted to use Terraform, you're really talking about multi-cloud, which is it's probably one of the most popular options for multi-cloud. So if you've got AWS and one of the other lesser clouds, you might want to use that one. It's actually written in HCL, which is HashiCorp configuration language, and it's a different definition language. The way that they sort of developed this language was for it to be human-friendly in the first place. So if you're familiar with YAML, you're probably going to be able to pick up Terraform pretty easily because it's actually not too bad. The state itself is something that you're going to have to think about designing and provisioning. It doesn't use CloudFormation like the other two, so it has its own state management. It's not a huge deal, but it's just something else to think about. It is free, but if you want to look at the enterprise options, there is a cost. There's a cloud-based version and also a self-hosted version, which is pretty expensive, I hear. So this is what it would look like in CDK. So this is a demo that I did a bit of a write-up on. So this is actually an AppSync configuration, which is a GraphQL API with a Athena for analytics and some Lambda functions. And what you're seeing on the top screen is all of the security changes that are going to happen. So from the terminal, you want to provision this in the cloud, you'll go ahead and deploy it, you've written your stack, and it's going to say, these are all of the configuration security items that are going to be changing. Do you want to accept that? And then down the bottom, you can see it's actually creating the stack. So this one went through about 19 different actions and it was successful, so that's fine. You get some pretty verbose output about what's happening at the time. And one of the huge benefits of infrastructure as code is because it's all written in code and everything's associated, you can also just destroy it. So when you're done with it, just go ahead and destroy, and it just cleans it up in the cloud and it's all gone. So you can think about that design when you're done with it, and then manually going to have to go back through and deleting each item probably isn't going to happen. So you can start to see infrastructure as code being pretty beneficial around developing patterns. So when you think about the CDK particularly, you can actually create your own libraries and modules, and then you can circulate them and use them. So if you have a standard template or design that you want to use, you can just start reusing the code. So as you progress along infrastructure as code, the reusability increases. It's also much faster. So you can think about going through creating each one of these resources in the cloud. It's actually pretty time consuming, and it's quite a manual process, but this is obviously going to be quite quick. So it can be a few minutes to deploy versus hours, days, weeks, whatever. And having the visibility of the state is a really cool advantage as well. So being able to click and see your deployment, it's been successful, these are all of my resources, it's pretty cool information. And automation, because you're using the terminal, you can start to see that, well, we can probably get this running through a pipeline, you can put some other checks in it, integrate it into your workflow, and get that sort of happening as well. And then collaboration, so because it's code, all of a sudden it's committed into a repo, you've got other people in your team using it, you're working with other communities as well to build out your patterns and share them, see how everyone else is doing it, and that's nice as well. The other ones I'd probably just mention is readability. So you can think about in the cloud, once you start getting all your different pieces together, it gets complex pretty quickly. And if you're in the console clicking around to work out where everything is and how it's configured, can be pretty overwhelming, but because it's in code and it's in front of you, you can kind of read it all on one page, and that's pretty cool. That's it, so it's pretty quick. I just wanted to, get people thinking about infrastructure as code. If you're in the cloud and you're not using infrastructure as code, maybe check it out. If you're working on projects and you're working with third parties that are delivering cloud pieces, maybe it's something just to be having a conversation about to say, hey, are you guys delivering this as infrastructure as code? It could be a project deliverable, those sorts of things. It's an artifact that lives on. And yeah, like if I just recommend everyone checking out CDK. It's a really cool project. The community's growing. The Slack channel's very active. Everyone's helping each other out. That's pretty much it. So done. Any questions?
Are there any questions?
Yeah? Yeah, you go.
At the beginning you said there was about 200 different services.
Yeah. Yep.
How do you know, how would a user who hasn't used it before know which one to use or which ones?
That's a good question. It depends on what you're building. So, when you look at the cloud, it's not, I want to build a web server or a mobile application. There's data lakes. So if you want to do lots of data processing or data analytics, so you want to build a data warehouse, you want to build a contact center. So usually you'd know, I want a particular service or what's the problem you're trying to solve first, and then tackle it. I think if you're just starting out and you've come from building servers, so virtual servers or something like that, and you've looked at other cloud providers that, so Lightsail and EC2 are probably some of the two that are probably the lowest entry point. So you can start, there's like LAMP stacks and stuff like that you can actually just provision in the cloud. So, and it'll get you interested and start seeing some of these concepts and just familiar with the console. So that's what I'd check out. Yep. Yep. Cool?
Cool.
Oh, yep.
So yeah, in terms of whenever you log into AWS, there's like another 1,000 different services that get listed in a web console. I guess there's a purpose for having a web console there, but this process makes so much more sense. And I understand, it makes sense for EC2 and stuff like that, we can just spin up the VM and stuff like that. So that makes sense to have an interface for that. But I guess what's the benefit for all the rest of the other quite reasonably esoteric services to have the management there?
Yeah, I probably bagged out the management console a little bit. So you will use it all the time, actually. So for logging and auditing and things like that, you're probably going to go in. So I left out a lot of services to make it simplistic, but I guess the cloud enables a lot of other services as well. So telemetry and open telemetry has become a big piece as well. So if you're troubleshooting your application, you might have additional services that provide that additional troubleshooting information, and that's going to be accessed by the console. It's either going to be in the console or you're pumping it out into something else where you're ingesting that in something. So same as logs. So for your application logs, you might have, again, a mobile or a web app, and you might want to output that to a log that you're going to go via the console most likely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would say so, yeah, for sure. Yep. Yep. Cool. Well, yep.
Is there any difference in the so once you're live in production with whatever infrastructure as code you've actually set up, is there sort of a recommended testing process if you're going to make modifications to that and push them into prod, or is it sort of a fairly standard pipeline as you would do if you were working with sort of standard virtual infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, if you'd separate it into multiple environments first, obviously, so you'd have however many environments that you want. And the way that you'd actually design your cloud, you might want to separate it into different, accounts and more isolation as well. And it's really just about limiting that blast radius. And, if something does go wrong, then you kind of limit it. As far as testing goes, it depends on what you've deployed. So you can do whatever your end application testing is, those sorts of things. As well as there's other tools that you can use to check your infrastructure as code to make sure it's correct before it's actually gone through. So there are other items around security, for example, where you can run automated security testing and those sorts of things. So yeah, if you're using CDK, you can actually use like, actual package testers and stuff like that to say, when I build my CDK stack, I expect there to be a bucket, like those sorts of things. So you have additional testing you can do. So that's more advantages of using CDK. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was actually a really great introduction to infrastructure as code. So hopefully you get to give that to more people.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
I'll introduce our next speaker as well. Some of you may know David Beitey. He's presented with DevNQ before, and he's very involved in the community. So David's going to be here tonight. And he actually hasn't told me in detail what his talk's on, so it's going to be a bit of a surprise for everyone.
Was I supposed to?
I don't know. So I'll introduce David. I'm sure David will introduce himself a bit more, and we'll go from there.
Cool, awesome. See that all good, and this one for later. All right, awesome. Hey everybody, so my name's David. I wear lots of different tech hats. So tonight we're going to be talking about hard drive tables. And so we could talk about, when we're talking about hard drive tables, we could talk about things like the master boot record and its incredible 38-year history, and how it originally started with, started with 24K of RAM and so forth. We could also be talking about GPT, or GUID partition tables. And we could talk about things like how the legacy support in this within the grub environment actually has a GUID that actually translates into an Easter egg. So we could talk about that, or we could, oh, hang on. Right, my talk has failed. Uh-oh, that's not good. Okay, well, hang on. Well, let's actually book, so we could talk about this, we could talk about the humor of the grub authors and so forth all night long, but we're going to talk about something else instead. We're going to talk about e-waste. And this is something I get really excited about. This was me a day or so ago. I work for a large organisation, a university, which means we produce a lot of different e-waste. To be fair, where I'm at, we're pretty good. Most stuff doesn't end up thrown in the bin. But in 2 years, I've recovered something like about $14,000 worth of items that have been accidentally thrown away because of laziness, non-technical dumpers, and just people who are generally unaware of things that could actually be reused. And so this perceived trash is my treasure. So this is the sort of the darker side of e-waste, is that you end up with large amounts of trash that ends up getting shipped overseas to places like this in China. You've got hundreds of thousands of migrant workers that are working in hazardous environments with dangerous materials. And there's plenty of horrifying stories that you hear about people melting down boards to try and get a couple of dollars worth of gold out of it and so forth. So the human and environmental aspects of this are epic. But what can we do about it? So as technicians and people in the tech community? Well, to start with, you could watch this fun sustainability video that we produced last year. And thanks to Lindsay Ward for co-starring. You can search for JCU OIC, which was our group name on YouTube. And spoiler alert, I jump out of bins a lot. And speaking of bins, this is one of our example bins out at James Cook University, where I've recovered things like keyboards, mice, cables by the hundred and hundreds of cables, monitors, TVs, phones, computers, and various different parts, including something that's particularly near and dear to me, which is the humble 3.5-inch hard drive. I mean, 3.5 inches, it's cool, it's solid, it's very nice, even, it looks fancy and so forth, but what the heck do you do with them? Well, you could go on Amazon and you could buy this awesomely named shredder, which was free shipping on Prime Day from the US, but it doesn't actually, it shreds the hard drive and creates way more waste, but it doesn't solve the problem, just produces more micro waste. So, what do we do about this? So, what can we do? So, here's one I prepared earlier, and you get the idea. So, da-ta! Sorry, terrible pun. So, this is what we can do. So when we're talking about hard drives and hard drive tables, this is 22 3.5-inch hard drives all stuck together. Total storage capacity about 6 terabytes or so. And normally I would have a piece of glass on top of it. I'll show you what the other one looks like. But yeah, it weighs about 12 kilos. So if you saw me struggling, yeah, I don't have muscles. Okay, fine. Stuck together with 1.5 tubes of liquid nails. Thanks, Bunnings. So this is an example of the first hard drive table that I bought. It can't be here tonight because it's in production in my office. It was a beneficial, so it came originally from 40 identical 40 gig hard drives from a server cluster we had at work that were being thrown out. So we sort of decided to repurpose it and upcycle it. Considered a number of other different designs and so forth, but essentially this design here, it's pretty stable, it seems to work pretty well, it hasn't fallen over, yeah, it's been more stable than the hard drives were in production. But yeah, so we considered other different strategies, but putting together a larger table with 108 drives or whatever would lead to something like 65 kilos worth of weight, way too heavy to move. This is hard enough on its own. So yeah, stick it all together, rubber stoppers on the top like we've got here, piece of glass from a second-hand store, costs about $10. Cool, right? All right, maybe it's not as cool as a floppy disk skyscraper or a hard drive coffee table with a platter from the 1960s that's about this wide, or a binary chair, or a iMac aquarium, which is super cool and you can buy them, or a mouse pad couch that was reproduced from 1,000 different mouse pads that a university was throwing out. But yeah, so look, as I build these things, they're getting more and more exciting. And if you have a look on the top here, you've actually got a 3 terabyte hard drive that failed. So that's kind of cool. Sad for e-waste and so forth, but you can reuse it and it looks interesting. So how do you build one of these things? Well, you get the materials and the hard drives, you line it, glue all the layers together, wait till it dries, add the rubber stoppers on top and buy some glass and so forth, and then do a lightning talk about it. So yeah, so what can we do? So every average Australian produces about 23 kilos of e-waste. This is 12 kilos alone. So, just that alone, plus this one too. There you go, now it's 13. So have a think about it. So think about, reducing what you're using, reusing where you can and fixing stuff, upcycling into fun, exciting projects. This is my third table that I've built and I've got almost enough drives for another one. And thinking about recycling where you can. So recycling, there's a few different options. Officeworks will take stuff in Townsville, get sent to MRI. MRI is a recycling company. Townsville City Council takes certain bits and pieces through transfer stations. Or alternatively, you could just give me your hard drives too. Secure wiping guaranteed if they're still working. And on my wish list for that old Mac SE and my ancient Mac, so love old Macs, especially ancient ones with keyboard and mice. And yeah, I'm chasing that specifically for that old Mac SE. So, get in touch. Cool. Any questions? Tristan.
How much PII is on that table?
Yeah. Let's.
Okay.
Look, honestly, at the end of the day, probably most of the drives are pretty much dead and not working. But yeah, in terms of some of them, they're connected up using old IDE connections. So to be fair, haven't checked those over entirely, but for the most part, they were in the bin. So yeah, some of them could actually still be working. So you're welcome to.
So someone has made the decision that it wasn't important data anyway.
More or less, yeah. So they should either the hard drives are dead. Where I've been able to check them if they're SATA and so forth. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, if I've been able to connect to the drive in some sort of particular fashion, I go ahead and wipe it with a 7-stage DoD wipe and so forth. So generally the answer should be none, but it's a possibility that there's actually some really, right in here somewhere, there's an ancient SATA connected drive. Here you go. So, one of those really, really long, thin ones from server farms. Yeah, and so essentially I don't have a connection for that. So there could be data on that, but anyway, if you work in building your own and you were concerned about that, maybe glue up the pins, or rip out the platters inside before you rebuild it, or a magnet. Or a magnet. There you go. Lots of different answers.
Do
Kate?
you see that there's capacity to move from sort of individual production to sort of large-scale production? Some sort of, Townsville hard drive table
Association?
association
Sure, look,
sales
I'm always interested in business ideas. I would love partners to help scale this up and so forth. One in every business right here. We could be putting, this could have been, there you go, this could have been right here. I don't know if I trust the magnets in that, so maybe work on that one. But with glass on the top, it's probably enough distance between that. So, but yeah, in seriousness, e-waste is a massive problem, and too much of it gets thrown in the bin, either accidentally or intentionally, and so forth. And yeah, we need better processes around that. So it's good to have Officeworks to receive those things, and the council's taking it, but what I was talking about before with those recycling methods, things like the War on Waste have done a bit of investigative journalism around that, and sort of have found out that the devices, when they get shipped out, they just go on a boat, get shipped over to Southeast Asia somewhere, and end up in giant piles like that. So, we need better processes around that. I am helping a little bit in this way, and yeah, it's functional in my office. So, but yeah, we need better processes.
Do you see that there's capacity for education for people to understand better about what's happening sort of at the end of life for their products? Do you think it's something where people maybe don't necessarily understand what the implications are? I mean, I know I'm terrible with the ordinary recycle bin. Forever I'm going, my God, which bin does this go in? Because there's about 5 different recycle bins. So is that something where there's sort of space there for public education around it?
I think so. This sort of thing is, it's a talking point. I'm talking about it tonight and making people aware of it and so forth. But yeah, the fact that people can see it, it's in my office when someone comes to visit and so forth, you can talk about it and talk about where it's come from, would hopefully build that sort of awareness. And, planning to put this talk online afterwards with the instructions and whatnot to say, hey, think about this sort of thing. I think people are really keen and interested, and particularly those IMAC aquariums. Someone's built an entire business out of that. So not only are they they're making things that look cool and look exciting, and people are throwing fish in them and so on, but also people are thinking about, other different ways of reusing it and so forth. And I think that culture is really building up as we go on. So yeah, I think just being able to see it is sort of, whereas it's just too easy to throw the rubbish away, but if you can make something that kind of looks cool out of it and so forth, then yeah, and functional, why not?
The education is also showing future generations what technology was like in the past as well. It's a way of keeping it.
Yep.
Like not a lot of people would have seen those old iMacs
Yeah.
what a computer looked like 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Here's another example of, so this is a Mac 2 couch. So they're giant, massive boxes like this and so forth. When each of those came out with about $5,000 US, so that couches would have cost about $100,000. But yeah, most people wouldn't have ever seen something like that. Beige boxes are probably, for younger generations and so forth. Yeah, I know I have work experience kids and stuff like that sort of come through, and they've seen the inside of a computer, let alone this sort of older tech and whatnot. But yeah, it's an interesting sort of cross section. You've got SATA drives mixed in with IDE drives, mixed in with whatever the other standard is for servers and so forth from back then. SAS, there you go. Yeah. But yeah, so it's certainly interesting to see how things have changed over time. But yeah, otherwise people aren't necessarily talking about it, which is why, I've got a whole lot of floppy disks in my office as well that someone gifted me when they were throwing stuff out. And I thought, actually, that tower idea looks kind of cool, so I might give that a go at some point. But yeah, educational opportunities. Any other questions? Anyone want to bid on this fantastic table? I'll start bidding at $1.
I don't know how many until you make a throne.
It's too heavy. That's true.
2.5-inch table.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know about, so I've got a whole lot of 2.5-inch hard drives. SSDs are really making me sad because, it's good for power and everything like that, but they're just not as hefty, and just, I don't know if it's going to hold up. You need a lot of them to stack them all together, so.
You'll be able to make graphics cards tables soon.
That's true. Ooh, that's cool. But yeah, there's lots of other fun furniture. This is only a smattering of what I found online, but yeah, you can find, I've yet to find anyone to actually build it out of 3.5-inch hard drives, so couldn't find one of those online, so yeah, that's why I decided to give it a go.
Table as a service?
TAS, yeah, maybe, that's right. If you've got old hard drives, come and chat to me, and if you're interested in chatting about e-waste and waste management, very keen. Cool, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
I've recycled patch panels. They were going to chuck out
Oh,
a
yeah.
whole rack
Yep.
with patch panels.
Yep.
And I just pulled all the patch panels out and sold them. So
There you-
rubbish to money.
Yeah,
So-
there you go. That's it. Too much of that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking you need a harness to weight. Like it seems like a gym kind of opportunity where they do like a dumbbell.
Yep, that's true. Well, this is a pretty good start. Yeah. Showing my manliness right here. I'll carry this one away. And it might actually, yeah. I'm worried it might fall over. I might kill somebody.
Well, that was actually very interesting, David. I very much enjoy these evenings because we always get content that I don't expect.
That's because I didn't tell you about it.
Well, that's right. That's why I don't ask questions. I just ask for titles and as little information as possible. I think in the past we've had lots of other different topics as well, physical security, things like that. So I'd like to thank our three speakers tonight, Kate, Mick and David. And in particular, I'd like to thank Mick, who has come along for his first time to present. And I would like to give him a prize or a gift for coming along. It's a hard drive. It's actually a copy
100
of
gig.
Clean Code. I don't know if everyone's read this or if you have a copy of it. It's actually a very good book, and I make all my juniors read it. So I'm giving away copies as gifts at the moment. So
Thank you so much.
hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you.
I made my master's students read it.
Yeah, it's a great book. So if anyone else is also looking for a good book on kind of how to build clean code, it's a good book for that. So thank you everyone for coming along tonight. We've got a few more things we'll run through. If my clicker works. So first of all, tonight has been proudly sponsored by Smart Precinct. They have provided the food, the drinks. There's still more food and drinks if you want any more. Feel free to go and grab some afterwards. There'll also be another surprise. One thing we are trying to encourage people to do is sign up for the mailing list at the moment. We've got heaps of jobs going out. I'm trying to send out jobs on a monthly basis or more regularly. But if you're looking for work, if you're advertising work, or if you're just looking to find out more about events like this or other events in the innovation and development community in North Queensland, by all means go along, sign up there. You'll get 1 or 2 emails a month. It's not too many, but it'll just keep you up to date. So that's signup.devnq.org, and that information all remains in DevNQ for anyone who's wondering. Forever. Yep, that's right. So one other thing is this meetup actually marks 5 years of DevNQ. We started this in May 2016 with a meetup at the brewery. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight because you're celebrating our 5th birthday with us. I'd also like to thank all of our sponsors over the years. Smart Precinct, obviously, who's given us the venue and the food tonight. AWS, who sent speakers. JCU supported us with venues and a number of other ways. FlashFX, who's provided speakers as well. JetBrains has provided licenses and sponsorship before. ACS as well. Safety Culture provided us with venues, speakers, food, drink, you name it. Jezzy has also provided sponsorship for food and drink before. And Twilio has provided their support for our hackathons previously, giving us free use of their services. We've actually got some stuff planned with Twilio coming up as well, so stay tuned if you're interested in a speaker from Twilio. Most of all, I think what 5 years of DevNQ defines is a growing strength in our community. In the last 5 years, we've held 40 DevNQ dedicated events, and we've supported about 10 others from other organisations. We have about 400 people who receive our emails, notifications, meetup information, and there's about 300 unique people who've been to our events and engaged with DevNQ in various ways over that time. And I think that shows that North Queensland has a strong development community. People are interested in what we're doing here at DevNQ, building a stronger community, getting everyone together and networking them and introducing people to other people in the community and other opportunities. And it also means that we're building a stronger community through that. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming along, for being involved, both here and at home. It's really important that you guys kind of are here tonight and have supported us through this time. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming. And guess what? There's going to be cake. So, woo! There's actually a lot of cake, so... I think that's all tonight. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, David.
Because you've already heard plenty from me already. But as Tristan said, it's been 5 years and it's been amazing. So don't run away, Tristan. Come, you can come back. So it was started back 5 years ago. I mean, I was at the very first event way back then, 2016 in that case, and started originally by Tristan Davey here, as well as Tom Dance at Safety Culture. And yeah, I mean, I speak for absolutely everybody here tonight, everyone in TV land and everyone on our meetup groups and so forth, when we say that Tristan has done an amazing job to keep this whole thing going. And we are so very appreciative of your work and everything like that. And I think no one would disagree with me when we were to say that you would be our benevolent organiser for life for DevNQ. But yeah, we really appreciate everything that you do. Yeah, I appreciate every time I come to one of these things. So happy to help contribute with that. But thank you so much for organising tonight, for 5 years of amazing talks, and for building this community. So just give Tristan and Tom as well, by extension, a round of applause.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Cool, that's it.
All right. We'll get some cake.
You're gonna have our cake and eat it too?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm just going to cut off the stream quickly, unless the people at home want to watch us eating cake.